Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As usual, I want to remind everybody to rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Okay, so I just want to go ahead and apologize off the rip on this one. This might be a little more ranty than usual because I just spent the last hour trying to get through technical difficulties, which, just a tip for everybody. If you do a podcast and your spouse also does a podcast, don't let your spouse touch your podcasting laptop because we'll fuck up all your levels and you'll spend an hour trying to figure out why it sounds like you're recording on a tin can in outer space. Okay. Hi, everybody. How are you today? As you can tell from the title of this episode, we are going to be talking about the story from this weekend that was not the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which... Can we never have another slow news cycle again? I mean, that was fun for about 3 hours on Sunday morning, and then I was just done with it. But it just went on for days and days and days and days, and I'm happy that we're done with it, but can we just never do that again? What I do want to talk about is the infamous Chinese prom dress tweet, which... I'm going to go ahead, hold on, I have to look up this girl's name again, and I'm going to completely butcher the pronunciation of it. Keziah Diem tweeted out tweets of herself in her prom dress, like young girls do, and it was a Chinese-themed dress. And she had pictures of herself in the dress and doing cute little poses and all that good stuff. And somehow or another, I'm not entirely sure because I don't think this dude actually knows her, but a guy named Jeremy Lamb retweeted one of her tweets in the dress and said that my culture is not your goddamn prom dress, which, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, nobody even asked you. Why are you even involving yourself in this? But, of course, as this does, the tweet went wide. We had to have this huge cultural appropriation conversation where you had people attacking this poor girl, people defending her. To her credit, she stood up for herself. She basically said that she likes the dress. She's happy she wore the dress. She would wear the dress again. And all y'all can go sit the fuck down. Not the last part. I made up the last part. But I'm pretty sure she would probably have said that too. At any rate, the whole thing was just so stupid. Because, of course, as it always works out, if you are going to say things on Twitter, especially if you are going to call somebody out for cultural appropriation, maybe check over some of your past posts and make sure you don't have anything problematic in there, like using the word nigger or saying that you're eating tamales with chopsticks, because Twitter will find those tweets and they will repost them and they will ask you, hey, what about this over here? What's this mean? And then you're going to have to explain yourself. And then you just look like an idiot for even bringing up the topic in the first place. Anyway, like I said, the whole conversation just got stupid. And the kid that retweeted it, he did tweet out that this was kind of like an eye-opening experience for him. And he seemed somewhat contrite, so I'll give him that. Like, maybe you learned something from this. But, I mean, the whole thing was just really fucking dumb. And then a couple days after that, it started coming out that people who actually live in China managed to see this tweet. I'm not entirely sure how. I don't think Twitter exists in China, but anyway. And they started saying that they didn't have a problem with it, that they had no problem with her wearing this dress, about sharing Chinese culture. So it's just another one of those ways that virtue signaling just ends up backfiring, in that maybe before you haul off and do that, maybe check to see if the people who are supposed to be offended by this are actually offended by it before you go and make a big fucking deal out of it. This whole incident did make me think about a couple of things, though. First of all, the ridiculousness that is cultural appropriation. And second off, the idea of political horseshoe theory. So let's just go ahead and start with my thoughts on cultural appropriation, which is that the whole concept is fucking stupid. It makes no sense. Especially if you live in these here United States of America. Because guess what? If you live here, you've culturally appropriated. Which I don't consider it appropriation, I consider it appreciation. But the whole idea of America and American culture is that it is a mashup of other cultures that were brought here by immigrants, by people who assimilated, and then shared their culture with everybody else who was already here, who then shared their culture with those people. And that's how we came up with American culture. So this whole idea that you're not supposed to do or say certain things, it just makes no sense in America, because that's what our culture is. And it's one of the great things about this country is that we do have this huge land mass that can accommodate millions and millions and millions and millions of people who all come here. And then they bring their culture here, and then they share it with all of us. And then all of us are a little better off for it. It's nice to live in a culture that is diverse and rich and does draw from other cultures. Like, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And I'm not understanding people who want to retrograde from that and go back into this very boxed off, nope, this is for these people and this is for those people, and you can't do this if you're not one of those people. Like, it makes no sense to me as an American. Like, I don't get that mindset. The second thing it made me kind of think about is the concept of the political horseshoe theory, which, if you don't know what it is basically the idea of, instead of looking at politics and political stances on a linear left to right line, like a straight line, it's looking at it as a horseshoe, which basically you have your extreme left, you have your extreme right, and then gradually going up towards the top of the horseshoe, you get to the center. And the idea behind it is, not only are the extreme left and the extreme right further away from the center than they would be on a linear line, they are much closer to each other than they are to anybody else, which, if you ever want to have fun, point that out to somebody on the extreme left or the extreme right and watch their heads explode, because they will swear up and down that they are different from each other, and the rest of us are like, no, you're not. Nope. And the whole idea behind the horseshoe theory was pointing out more, not so much policy, but methodology, that both groups tend to try to use the same sort of methods to impose their ideology, like authoritarianism, totalitarianism, kind of forcing people into their way of thought. But I am starting to think more and more that there's a lot of policy that is lining up between the two of them. And I mean, there's lots of examples you can go for, but for the sake of this, I would say the topic of racial segregation is most definitely one of them. The extreme right has always been pretty open about the fact that they do want actual, like, physical racial segregation. Like, whites live over here, blacks live over here, Latinos live over here, Asians live over there. But my point is, on the extreme left, when you start to engage in these sort of browbeating cultural appropriation arguments, really what you're doing is no different than that. You're just not explicitly calling it that. Because when you start saying that only certain people can do certain things, or they can only wear certain things, or they can only eat certain things, the natural logical progression for that is that they can only go certain places. Certain people can only live certain places. So you start getting this breakdown. It's like, okay, whites can live over here and blacks can live over here. And if you're white, you can't go move over to the black neighborhood because that's a black neighborhood and you can't move there because you're white. Which, that's, to me, what this whole cultural appropriation thing is trying to break people down and segregate people on the basis of race and ethnicity. And you'll never, ever, 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 ever get anybody to admit to this, but when you stop and look at it logically, I mean, that's what it is. That's all it can be, is when you start to say that only certain ethnic groups can do certain things and other ethnic groups cannot do those things because they are not part of the ethnic group that can do those things. That's racial segregation. There's nothing else to call that. And I think all of us can agree that racial segregation, no matter who is advocating for it, is pretty fucking gross. Like, that's not a way to conduct society. It's certainly not the way to conduct American society. It's so detrimental. It's so corrosive. It's engaging in identity politics, which, as far as I'm concerned, anybody that does that can be shot into the sun. Which, I mean, just get the fuck out. I don't even want to talk to you. But it's one of those things where it's like you're never going to get the left to acknowledge it, but it's there and it needs to be called out. No matter who is advocating for the segregation, you need to be called out for advocating segregation. And it's especially rich coming from leftists who want us to all embrace diversity and multiculturalism, which I agree with. I mean, I'm all for that, but you want me to embrace diversity and multiculturalism by not embracing diversity and multiculturalism? Like, what else does that look like if you're not sharing cultures? Like, I don't really get that. Like, if you want to call somebody out for cultural appropriation, but then you want to bitch about diversity, it's like, it's either A or B. You can't have both. You can't put people in racial boxes and then cry about, oh, there's not enough diversity. And it's like, well, that's your fault. Like, what do you want? I don't get it. Like, whenever anybody steps out of their little racial box, you call them out. But then if they don't step out of their racial box, you call them out. So it's either A or B, guys. You can't have it both ways. And it's not even so much that it's confusing, which it is, but whenever this kind of thing happens, they're so strident about it. Like, I think it was Dave Rubin who tweeted out the other day on this topic about being on a campus, and there was a white guy with dreads, and he was being screamed at and told that he can't have his hair like that because he's white, which I'm like, okay, again, like, what do you want? Like, okay, he can wear his hair however he wants. This is a free country. He can do whatever he wants. But the whole concept that you want diversity, but you don't want diversity, it's really confusing to me, and I don't really know how to counteract that because I don't know kind of where to go with that. Like, what do you want? I'm very confused. And that story kind of leads into the next point that I want to make is, who died and made y'all the cultural police? Like, first of all, going back to the original tweet, like, who made Jeremy Lamb the king of China and the arbiter of what should be offensive to Chinese people? Like, every time anybody makes that stance, it's like, who the fuck are you? Like, do you speak for all these people? Like, no, you don't. Like, who are you? I can't imagine that level of ego to be like, I will determine what is offensive for women because I have a vagina, so therefore I get to speak for every woman on the planet. Like, that just, it makes no sense to me. It's so sanctimonious, and it's just really bullshit, and I'm kind of tired of it, honestly. I really wish these people would go away. I know they're not, and I know it's only getting worse, but I think maybe starting to call people out on their bullshit as bullshit instead of trying to, like, argue with them about how they're wrong, just basically saying, no, this is bullshit and I'm not playing your game, might be the best option at this point. And if that doesn't work, maybe just telling them to mind their own fucking business and not worry about what other people are doing. Barring it physically harming you, it's none of your business what people wear, what they eat, who they associate with, where they go. So just back the fuck up off of people. Stop judging people. Stop virtue signaling. Nobody gives a shit how woke you are. All you do is just look like an idiot to anybody with half of a gram of common sense in their head. So just stop. Just stop. But to sum this all up, basically, Hannah Montana girl in the Chinese dress looked cute. She didn't do anything wrong. Don't start Twitter beefs. Cultural appropriation is really fucking dumb. Stop virtue signaling. And extreme left and extreme right, maybe you two can get together and, I don't know, sort out your non-differences and maybe stop being this way. Maybe. Probably not. But at that point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So take care, and until next time.